in the small country of Lebanon, just north of Israel, a woman walked into a bank at 11 a.m. Nobody thought anything of it, and everybody thought that it was going to be a normal day at one of the largest banks in the entire country. But surprisingly, right after she walked in, she pulled a gun out of her purse, cocked it, pointed it to the ceiling, and told everybody to get down. She was taking hostages. She went through the bank and went to the tellers while other people recorded, and she recorded herself while on the phone talking to people. She took $13,000 from the bank and then disappeared. She was not arrested for this, and everybody in the bank who was a normal citizen did not want her to be arrested either. Outside of that, on top of them not wanting her to be arrested, she was heralded as a hero. The reason is because Lebanon is in a massive financial crisis, and she didn't just steal money from the bank. She had to steal her own money from the bank. Take a look at this really quick. So, this is what we're working with. Incredibly interesting, isn't it? So, this is only one of a multiple string of bank robberies that Lebanon's banks have been experiencing, but people aren't there to just steal the most amount of money they can from banks. People are only there to steal their own money from their own accounts from the banks. And a lot of you guys may be wondering, why is that the case? And if that is the case, why are so many people supporting them? Because this was one of the first times. The reason why this bank robbery got so popular and got so big and left Lebanon was because this is one of the first times there was a conjoined bank robbery effort that was happening. A man was robbing a bank at the same time that she robbed her bank, and they were in conjunction trying to get their money out of the bank itself. And everybody who was there, and even the hostages, were happy that they were doing it. Take a listen to this from a man who was outside the bank when it was happening.
Outside the bank in Beirut, public support for Subra was clear.
Should he go to jail because he needs to pay people while his money is locked in the bank? He wants what is rightfully his. He went into the bank. Good luck to him. We as Lebanese people stand in solidarity with anyone who has rights.
So yeah, this is incredibly interesting. Bank-based robbery. Unironically, yes. The reason for why these people have to go in and try to steal money and their own money from their own accounts is because almost every single normal person in Lebanon has been locked out of all of their money. They've been locked out of their savings. They've been locked out of their pay stubs, almost all of them. Here's a little writing on what happened. A woman in Beirut today held up a bank, not to rob, but to withdraw her own money. Needing to pay for her sister's cancer treatment, the same thing happened in a bank in Ali. The actions were coordinated by a depositor union, which represented people whose money the banks have stolen. And so this woman, as well as some other people who've held up banks to withdraw money from their own bank accounts, have been drawn to this because of the massive financial crisis that Lebanon has found itself in. Recently, for the first time ever, Lebanon defaulted on all of its debts. For the first time ever, this country has done this. This is a massive thing because Lebanon had not even defaulted on their loans for even going through the 15-year-long civil war that the country was embroiled in before they came together afterwards and formed the government and the country that we know today as Lebanon. The country used to be called the Switzerland of the Middle East, even with their incredibly lax banking regulations and laws and their massively oversized banking sector that has more money than I think 4 times the GDP of the country itself. And now the country is in one of the world's worst economic depressions since the 1850s, as the World Bank has said. The depression and the economic situation in Lebanon is so bad that even the World Bank had to come out and start to sound like socialists when they started talking about what the elite did to that country. It's really bad. After they got out of the 15-year-long civil war that devastated the country and its infrastructure, the politicians of Lebanon and Lebanese people came together and they wanted to rebuild, but the government leaned a lot on loans, and a lot of loans. Okay, and one big loan that they didn't pay back, loan debts that they didn't pay back, equal to over 1.2 billion euros that they did not pay back this time. And the deficit of the country is over 20%. That means they're spending 20% more than they're making. And it's gotten so bad when it comes to how many loans that they've had to lean on, and the interest payments that they thought that they're going to repay, and the corruption that the government's been involved in, is now the interest payments, simply the interest payments on just the loans that the country's taken out, is now soaking up 50% of the country's budget. Think about that. 50% of the entire country's budget is solely for interest payments on loans that they took out to rebuild their country. That's it. That's it. And while this crisis was going on, what happened is that the Lebanon's government saw that they were having massive issues. And so what they did is they borrowed billions and billions and billions of dollars from their massive banking sector, right? A lot of money. And they basically told the banks, hey, give us money. We'll give you amazing, crazy interest payments. And then you won't have to worry about it. The bank said, sure, we'll let you have the money. And then gone. The money just disappeared. It was gone. And what happened is that bank leaders who were working with the corrupt politicians spent the money, and now they're shoveling all that debt pain onto the normal people in the country who had almost no say about what was going on and who don't have a path forward for getting themselves out of this economic mess. And so what the banks did, instead of going to the government and talking about and asking them for what really happened, now what the banks are doing is they shut down everybody's bank accounts, and now people are shut out of hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, billions in total, that the banks are just holding on to and have now stolen from everybody because they want to be able to pay, because they want to be able to get their money back. And so now nobody is allowed into their bank account. If you're poor, if you're hungry, if you're starving, it doesn't matter. The bank doesn't care. So now Lebanon has gone from a reasonably well-off country to being turned into a barter economy, because there's no possible way that you can get any of your life savings out of your bank account. And so that's why the depositor union staged like a forced withdrawal from the banks, because there are so many people who are lost now with no money, with no future, with nothing. People are killing themselves because the elites in the country have mishandled the economy so poorly that some people don't even know if there's a possible way to get out. The government definitely doesn't, because they haven't provided any information on how the country can possibly even begin to get out outside of exorbitant, ridiculous, and wild taxes. Just so you know, it got so bad that Lebanon taxed WhatsApp. Like, they added a tax to your average person for logging on to WhatsApp per day. Instead of working with like how the banking sector for how much money they had, or other corporations, they started to just tax people for using their phones. And that caused mass uprisings and a lot of other issues, which worsened the economic future for the country in total. I want to take a look at somebody here who's an economics expert and what happened to the country and how the elites destroyed it. Vast majority of Lebanese elites have contributed to the crisis says one academic. Right? Tehran, professor at the Lebanese Institute, at the Lebanese International University, blames Lebanon authorities for the political and economic crisis that the country is in. So, Lebanon's pound has collapsed since 2019 when the economy crumbled under their mountain of debt. Yet the cabinet formed in September with the promise of starting to fix the economy has not met in 3 months as rivals argue about the conduct of the probe into the devastating 2020 Beirut port blast. How do you see the future of Lebanon in the light of this economic crisis? The future for Lebanon is bleak in light of the economic crisis and ongoing collapse. It is not possible to adapt to the collapse of this size and pace with no serious, real solutions on the table. What's the role of the Lebanese leaders in deepening the ongoing crisis that also suffers from corruption? The vast majority of the Lebanese political and economic and financial leaders are the ones who have contributed to the situation and were responsible for the catastrophe that Lebanon is best by. These politico-economic elites themselves prevent any solution, and they want to protect their banks from paying any cost or losses and or collapse. Add to it the instance of some to protect the accused officials and suspect who have exploited their positions to accumulate wealth at the expense of the Lebanese people's bankruptcy and the theft of those depositors' money, especially in the middle and poor classes. It even talks about how the West had a role in this as well. The West had a role in this economic collapse since the beginning of the aid conference that started in Paris, went to Paris for CEDRE conference. The West is the one who protected and is still sponsoring those who plundered the public's money for their deposits. So the West isn't stepping up to do anything. We're still doing business with a lot of these people who enrich themselves from stealing all of this money from the Lebanese people, which shut down their banks and cut them out of their life savings and are now going wildly poor. I think it's that 40% of Lebanese people are now in jeopardy or have been plunged into abject poverty because of this. It is horrible what's happening to a lot of these people. The leaders put their smuggled money in Europe and in the United States, suspicious transfers. While the source of the transferred money was illegal, the assets belonged to the Lebanese people, but the Western hypocrisy is obvious. But frankly, it was not the West who imposed on these governments successive parliaments and state institutions to refrain from building electricity plants, railways, subways, and efficient public transportation, but greed and the culture of plundering public money and sharing of nation incomes with international loans led to this bankruptcy. The Western countries just invested in ongoing corruption, as we typically do. We don't. A lot of the times, a lot of people have a lot of times everyone's really like Western centric. And even the people who always talk about how bad the West is are incredibly Western centric as well. Even their analysis of how bad the West is Western centric. They think that we're at the center of everything wrong. It's just not true. We profit from it, which is incredibly horrible. But America, England, other countries, they didn't make these people, these leaders, not take care of their people. It just happened that when they didn't, they made a lot of money, and there was a lot of money to be made. And under capitalism, that's kind of just what happens. You just go where the money is going, no matter necessarily how illegal it can be. It's true. The West did not create capitalism. It is not like we didn't tell them to yoink all this money from people abroad. It just didn't happen. We just profited from it, and the people who are doing it profited from it because they could, right? And even if the West wasn't there, the likelihood of them not doing this is incredibly low, considering the rampant amount of corruption that is in the Lebanese government. And now, one big reason for why the Lebanese government is not really able to take up, hey, quit trying to eat on my trash can. That's my trash can where I keep my trash. Anyways, what's supposed to be saying? I lost my train of thought after I seen him trying to devour my trash. I'm busy. I'm in the middle of a smegment. You can't do this to me. After their massive civil war that had an incredibly large religious slant to it, Lebanon's government is incredibly secular. Sorry. It's incredibly segmented. And by law, different religious groups have to have a certain amount of representation in government. So on paper, that sounds perfectly fine. But in practice, what happened is that the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim groups, and specifically the biggest one, the Muslim one, Hezbollah, has become incredibly ingrained, has become incredibly complacent, and does not care about how much good that they can do for the country, and now cares about maintaining their amount of power and growing the amount of power that they have in Congress, their parliament, right? And so this has led to nepotism. This has led to massive amounts of corruption, as we can see. And one group that's even spoken out about this, I mentioned it earlier, has been the World Bank. So Reuters reports the World Bank berates Lebanon's elite for their zombie economy. Listen to this. Global lenders said that the nation's elite were still abusing their position despite Lebanon suffering possibly one of the 3 biggest financial crashes globally since the 1850s. Lebanon's deliberate depression is orchestrated by the country's elite that has long captured the state and lived off economic rents. Holy crap. See, I'm telling you, bro. World Bank's going crazy on these people. He's calling them like economic landlords, just leeches sucking off the hardworking Lebanese people, which is exactly true. That's exactly what these people are. Fueled by massive debt in an unsustainable way, it was financed. The crisis has slashed Lebanon's GDP by 58% since 2019, plummeting to an estimated $28 billion. The government revenues collapsed by almost half in 2021 and reached 6.6% of GDP, the lowest ratio globally in the entire world, right? The elite commands the main economic resources, generally large rents, and dividing the spoils of a dysfunctional state. Lebanon's politicians, former militia leaders, and other from families wielding influence for generations of the Christian and Muslim communities often acknowledge that corruption exists, but they generally deny individual responsibility and say that they're doing the best to rescue the economy. And we all know that that's just factually incorrect. They're making sure that they can maintain their own amounts of power in this situation, especially make sure that they don't lose any of their money, because one big thing that they're doing is making sure that nobody suffers any consequences from stealing money from all of these people. It got so bad that one massive bank leader was subject to a probe, a money laundering probe. And so this guy, a lot of people said that this guy specifically, who was the head of one of the largest banks in Lebanon, was money laundering and was sending money that he stole from the deposits and from the bank accounts of the Lebanese people and shipping it out of the country and holding it in places like France, Germany, and Luxembourg. Authorities in those countries froze the assets, totaled to $120 million. Sorry, 120 million euro or $132 million on March 25th in an investigation involving 5 suspects, European Union officials said. Raid Salame, I think that's how you pronounce it, is one of the suspects. A spokeswoman for Minich prosecutors told Bloomberg, declining to provide more details. Salame's office didn't immediately reply either. The investigation centers around money laundering and embezzling public funds in Lebanon between 2002 and 2021, an incredibly long time. 5 properties in Germany and France were seized, as well as several bank accounts. Salame has already been under investigation in those countries, raising pressure on the once celebrated veteran banker who had been at the helm of the central bank, also known as, I'm not even going to pronounce this because I'm going to butcher it, since 1993. So this is old school corruption, okay? This guy has been doing corruption in the Lebanese economy since before I've been born. All right, this guy, as well as a lot of other people. So I want you to know, to understand how long these fat cats have been sitting in office and how long they've been able to lie and cheat and steal the Lebanese people of their money and embezzling and money laundering under their nose until the entire economy just fell apart because it was all just facades to make people think that everything was going to be okay. So they wouldn't riot, so they wouldn't say anything, so they wouldn't kick any of them out of power. It's actually genuinely disgusting. He's the Babe Ruth of capitalism. Yeah, basically. And so honestly, if you thought that even maybe some of the people in the banks would think that there's something going on, nope. And it may be like for a change, nope. As dysfunctional and as poorly managed as the Lebanese government is, and how little they're doing, the second they try to do anything to stop the banks from stealing money from everyone and throwing the entire economy into the fire, they did a strike. And a strike against the government. A strike. This is what we call class consciousness. Okay? They did a strike. Against harmful populist stances against the sector. What the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? To stop them from money laundering everybody's cash? To stop poor people from not being able to open their bank accounts anymore? And so they said that's too populist. That's cringe. And we need to stop it. The Association of Banks of Lebanon, but this is going to be the ABL here. The ABL said in a statement that the banks can no longer bear harmful and populist situations at their expense and at the expense of the economy, and find themselves compelled to issue a general warning that is an invitation to everyone to deal seriously and responsibly with the current situation for the sake of moving forward for real recovery. I don't want to be touched. I don't want to have to pay for any of this. All of the corruption that we've been a part of, listen, it's not our fault. And don't try to make us feel any blame for this, okay? Don't make us feel any blame for this. We didn't do anything wrong. All right? So they held a strike. And so this is one of the big times for when people weren't able to, not even able to contact their banks, right? Let alone like be able to pull your money out. Before this, they've locked people out of their bank accounts. And so for months, people of Lebanon have not been able to access any of their money at all and had to find new ways to do it. And so this guy who we talked about, Salamis, home was raided, and a judge has started to take his probe of corruption more seriously. And that was also a big reason for why the bank was striking, right? And so the workers of that bank now striked because they didn't like that they weren't going to be able to get sweet deals anymore. And so they want to show everybody that they're not going to stand for this anti-corruption meddling that the courts and that like too many people have been up to recently, right? Like, remember, the cops have been letting those people who held up those banks go. Now, some of these banks have had to drop their lawsuits because they didn't want to be subject to rioting or having their buildings destroyed by citizens for the type of shit that they're getting up to, right? One of the last guys who robbed the bank, who held up the bank to withdraw his own money, he didn't actually, they actually didn't give him his money. They actually was like, no, we're not giving you any money. So there was a hold up. He threatened to light himself and the bank on fire. He had a rifle and everything, and all he wanted was his money back. And at the end of it, he didn't get his money back, but they didn't arrest him either. And so the banks are really angry that people keep trying to get their money back, and won't allow them to just hoard it, steal it, and spend it however they want. A judge who's authorized a judicial raid on the Lebanon Central Bank's headquarters in Beirut on Tuesday has tried more than once to arrest Raid Salamat, Lebanon's longtime central bank governor, and has openly accused the country's politicians of protecting him from prosecution. And so now even judges have started to come out to say that these politicians are doing everything in their power to make sure that he doesn't go to jail and not face any penalties for his part in the massive, what people are just calling a straight up Ponzi scheme. And imagine an entire country's economy is simply just a Ponzi scheme. It's horrible. It really is disgusting, right? So read a little bit of this. Corruption in Lebanon, however, is not just a matter of political patronage and rotten political contradiction. For decades, Lebanon's largely unproductive economy relied on regular infusions of foreign capital to function. When those inflows slowed because of the deepening political dysfunction and conflict, including in the neighboring Syria, the country's central bank reported in 2016 to what it called a financial engineering to fund government deficits and maintain an artificial high value for the Lebanese lira. In short, the central bank paid Lebanese commercial banks an exorbitant interest rates for dollar deposits, and those banks in turn offered their own generous returns to lure in more depositors. Everyone involved made a lot of money, even as the country's financial sector stealthily took on huge systemic risks. That's a Ponzi scheme, brother. And the elites are helping this along. In the most prominent example, Saad Hariri, if I think Hariri, I think if that's how you pronounce it. I'm doing my best, okay? I'm not Middle Eastern. Son of the former prime minister and business tycoon, his father Hariri Sr., who served as the prime minister himself from 2009 to 2011 and from 2016 to 2020, is the main shareholder in one of the country's largest banks. It may not have been illegal for the Lebanese official to benefit from the central bank's ruinous policies, but it certainly was corrupt. Shark pulls. I'm not doing a racism. I've never done a racism in my entire life. I have never done a racism ever. And it all fell apart in October 2019 when the already struggling Lebanese banks reacted to the massive anti-government protests by shutting their doors and denying depositors access to their accounts. This apparent attempt to preempt a bank run sparked a fatal crisis of confidence in the country's banking sector, rendering Lebanon's private banks, central banks, and state all suddenly insolvent. Oh, good fucking Lord. The total losses of the country's financial sector are estimated to be in the tens of billions of US dollars. The arrival of the pandemic in early 2020 compounded the country's economic misery, as did a catastrophic explosion in the port of Beirut in August of that year, which killed more than 200 people and causing billions of dollars in damage. And so this is where Lebanon stands today. But the problem is not that and this is just touching on what the US did again. The problem is not that the United States has looked away from the corruption in the past. It has also allowed anti-corruption efforts to be politicized in a way to undermine their credibility. In 2020, for instance, Trump's administration used the Global Magnitsky Act to sanction the leading Maronite Christian politician Gabrin Basil, ostensibly for corruption, but really because he is an ally of Hezbollah, which is the if I remember correctly, the big Muslim political conglomerate that helps run the entire country, right? If the Biden administration wants Lebanon's leaders to take its concerns about corruption seriously, it needs to shed the United States' reputation for tolerating corruption among friendly elites and dispel the impression that anti-corruption measures as sanctions are really tools to curtail Hezbollah's influence in Lebanon, which I'm not sure if Biden is up to that task. I hope he is, because the Lebanese people are suffering. There are lots of people who are suffering due to this massive Ponzi scheme of an economic system that these elites have levied onto these people without telling them what was going on, and has led to so much suffering, has led to so much pain, has led to something that none of them were even that none of them are, I think, even ready to begin to grapple with, which is the fact that a massive percentage of the Lebanese peoples, 80%, and just so you know, my numbers, 80% of Lebanese people slipping into poverty, and all of the 1.5 million Syrian refugees living in Lebanon as well, have gone into even more poverty, and hundreds of thousands fleeing the country due to economic issues. This is not a joke. This is not a meme. There's a reason why the people who held up those banks are seen as heroes. because the politicians who said that they were going to take care of these people, who were going to make sure that they have a bright future for them and their children and their friends and family and loved ones, all lied, cheated, and stole from them to a degree that we haven't seen in the modern world ever.